David Lammy has not bought Islander. David Lammy could not read Islander. You could read Islander, and you will when you pay $14.99 for it on the website and get it, and you can read it, and you'll look very smart, very clever, and very handsome when you're doing so. Got that out the way nice and quick. David Lammy is our current Foreign Secretary. He is a man who once stated that he was pretty certain that trans women can grow cervixes if they get a hormone treatment. He is also a man who very recently, when speaking about the Israel-Palestine situation, accidentally said that the Lebanese need to return to their homes in southern Israel, presumably right around the Gaza Strip is where he was intending there, and probably most notably, made an appearance at the UN last week where he said this.
But I say to the Russian representative on his phone as I speak that I stand here also as a black man whose ancestors were taken in chains from Africa at the barrel of a gun to be enslaved, whose ancestors rose up and fought in a great rebellion of the enslaved. Imperialism, I know it when I see it, and I will...
That's enough. That's enough of that. We know that David Lammy, who is a black man, is a black man, who has experiences as a black man that interest him on the world stage as a black man.
I think David Lammy might be signalling that he's a black man.
I don't know where you got that idea from.
I don't know. Certainly not my eyes.
No, certainly not. But if you listen to him, he drops a few hints here and there.
Really? I struggle to pick them up.
Yeah, so we probably spoke about this at the time. This was David Lammy on the world stage speaking to the Russian representative as a black man. And telling Putin that he needs to stand down. He's going to call out imperialism. We can't go back to a world where borders are aggressively redrawn, and we don't want a world where imperialism is the norm anymore. Imperialism is the norm for the world in general history.
Well, might makes right, and that's not changed. That is an iron law of reality. And also, in this speech, David Lammy basically criticised the Russians through his own worldview.
Oh yeah, through a woke, progressive worldview.
So to a Russian mind, that would just be David Lammy pats himself on the back trying to look tough while saying nothing of substance.
Well, I put it this way. I had to comment on this saying that the leftists like David Lammy, you can tell when they're making these speeches that they imagine themselves giving the climactic speech in a film. They've got the music swelling behind them, they're back in school, and they're speaking to the bully. And they're letting the bully know, you can't bully me anymore. I'm a good person and you're a bad person. And they change the hearts and minds of everyone around them. And they change the mind of the bully. And everybody gets home.
Do you know what happens in reality? The bully bullies them more.
Yeah. I can only imagine that on the other side of the phone, the Russian representative started absolutely pissing himself. Mm-hmm. If he could understand what Lammy was saying. He's like got Putin next to him. He's putting the phone. He's talking about how he's a black man now. His ancestors were enslaved. They're having a good laugh, because you know what Russia hears when they hear something like that? They hear, "Oh, you're the descent of slaves, so you're weak."
That is true.
That's literally what they hear, because they like power, they like strength, they like being strong, and they will look at you and go, "You're descended from losers, so we can dominate you easily." They look over at the West and they go, "Okay, who are the people in charge of the West right now? Virtue signaling weirdos who all want to talk about what victims they are, constantly complain about their mental health, and then talk about how they're enslaved by ancestors." And they shrug their shoulders and they go, "What are they going to do to us? They can't do anything."
One of the most frustrating things about wokeness is not only that it has made my life tangibly worse, but also it makes us look awful on the international stage. Just how weak and pathetic and effeminate and contemptible, basically.
Well, it makes a virtue of weak.
Of vice, yeah.
Yeah, and vice as well. And to every other nation, every other empire like Russia, on the world stage, well, that makes us easy pickings. And sadly, as you can see from this Politico article, who's telling Putin here? Is it David Lammy telling Putin that you're a slave-owning mafia boss? No, it's the UK, because he represents us as our foreign secretary. So this is the man representing us, our interests on the world stage, and doing that. What on earth is he thinking? Is it that David Lammy has not yet graduated to triple-digit IQ? Is it that David Lammy is an incompetent buffoon who embarrasses us all through our association with him?
I've seen him on Mastermind. He got none of his own specialist topic questions right. So.
Or is it that this is all part of David Lammy's master plan?
Oh, he's like that Chinese magician in The Prestige where he pretends to be feeble and weak, but actually it's all an act because he's secretly very powerful.
He pretends to be an idiot, yes. This is the Lammy Doctrine in action. This is a new Statesman article, and you can see that David Lammy is now a serious man conducting serious business because they took a serious photograph of him in a serious suit, which you may have noticed is black, including
Very
his
serious.
shirt, which is black. David Lammy, a black man wearing a black shirt and a black suit, very symbolic of him being black, which is something that he wants you to know. And
On a black page.
Yeah, there are other photos. Oh, wait, there was Donald Trump. This is a very, very long article. Here's a photograph of David Lammy contemplating his place in the world.
That really took me by surprise.
Yeah.
It's gone on like a nice... It's like a lovely scenery, and he's dressed in like funeral wear, like casual funeral wear.
But David Blair, I keep calling him David Blair, Tony Blair funeral wear, where he's got the top button undone.
I can't see that company slogan catching on. Tony Blair's funeral wear.
And here was the front cover for this particular issue. So this was all the way back in April, in the lead up to June, July. This was in the lead up to the election. Yes, it was. Where they were trying, whoever was in charge of Labour's PR at the time decided, we've got to work with David Lammy. We've got to sell David Lammy to the British public. How are we going to do that? What is he? Is he Boris Johnson, friendly buffoon, lovable fool, trustworthy but a bit funny?
Trustworthy?
Well, that's the way he tried to sell himself, right? Or somebody put their hand up and said, he said as a joke, he said, what if he's a Machiavellian genius? And nobody got that it was a joke. And that's what they ran with. That's the PR that David Lammy went with.
That would explain the Blair funeral wear, you know.
The Blair funeral wear. Yeah, and they say, Labour's foreign secretary in waiting on why Britain must adapt to the world as it is, not as liberals wish it to be. David Lammy, Machiavellian realist.
I also like how he's wearing the same thing throughout the entire article. You know how Lord Ali bought all of the Labour Party members lots of suits?
Mm-hmm. He only bought one for David.
Yeah,
he probably thought, well, this guy's not going to go very far, is he? And now he's foreign secretary.
You know what? If someone bought David Lammy a bunch of suits, I'd say, you know what? I'll let you off. Because clearly he's only got the one.
Well, clearly, yeah.
It's obviously a joke.
So the man who called Trump and was a reply guy, a serial reply guy for Trump back in 2019, called him a neo-Nazi sociopath, is now an uncompromising realist on the world stage with fingers in all of the different parts. Because that's what this article is. It's obviously a puff piece trying to sell a particular image of David Lammy as a man with fingers in every pie across the world, who has friends in every nation, who is the right man to be foreign secretary for our country now. Not only that, he has his own doctrine, which he has dubbed progressive realism. And this article doesn't really explain what it is, but in fact has a lot of other people, like Jonathan Powell and other people related to the Labour Party, trying to maybe get a guess at what progressive realism means, and the rest of it is about him being black.
Progressive realism is like hard water or something like that. I know that's an actual thing.
It's quite an oxymoron.
It sounds oxymoronic, doesn't it? Maybe it's not, like hard water.
And I think to sum up the article, it ends like this. This is the final paragraph. David Lammy is as comfortable among the tight terrace streets of Tottenham as he is inside the Washington Beltway. Local and global settings. Can he bring them together to create a foreign policy that resets Britain's relations with the world and works in the social and economic interests of the British people? And then it ends with him saying a lot of, the world is what it is. David Lammy, sighing, melancholic, thinking of how how depressing and grey yet hopeful the world can be, going, the world is what it is. Again, like a child who's only just learned a particular word or phrase and has to keep saying it over and over again because they're so excited. David Lamy wrote a little piece saying, you can read, this was back in April, saying, you can read my article that I wrote for the Foreign Affairs talking about it. My new essay in Foreign Affairs magazine outlines the case for progressive realism. This is the underpinning of how my next Labour government will deliver our goal of a Britain reconnected, as I laid out in my pamphlet for the Fabian Society last year. Yes.
If you're not familiar with them...
no, go
ahead. No, you go ahead.
No, you go on. You can probably explain it better.
So the Fabian Society are basically a socialist society whereby they're associated with all of the worst figures in British history, and the fact that he's written for them is like a self-own for anyone who isn't a socialist.
It's a self-report.
It is, yeah.
Certainly. So I thought, let's take a look. Okay, so unlike some foreign secretaries, David Lamy is a philosopher. And he has his own doctrine that he outlined in an article for Foreign Affairs, which is one of those lofty journals that people write in as a way to communicate with other elites across the world, to communicate intentions. I mean, Richard Nixon's written for it, William Burns, the head of the CIA, has written for it. Everyone who is anyone has written for it, oftentimes flatly outlining their plans for the world going ahead. So, excellent. David Lamy, all by himself, managed to write this article. So what does it... Yeah, round of applause, everybody. So what does it say? Well, I drew out some of the excerpts of what's important here. So he at first criticises the Conservatives' approach to global relations during their 14 years in power, saying that Conservative officials proved especially callous in their approach to the global South. Instead of fighting for the hearts and minds of the new global middle class, I don't think a globe can have... I think a middle class is more, kind of localized to one nation or region.
Surely global middle class just means the average person in the world.
Yep.
Doesn't it? So that's like the least specific he could possibly be.
Yeah, but instead of fighting for the least specific person imaginable, they addressed this group in often offensive tones, such as when the then Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson publicly recited a colonialist poem by Rudyard Kipling during a 2017 visit to Myanmar, and the government compromised one of the United Kingdom's greatest strengths, its soft power, by attacking institutions such as universities, courts, and the BBC. So if this is an outline and a demonstration of what progressive realism is going to be, so far in this article we get hectoring tone police politics, wokeness, and the support of soft power like the BBC. So business as usual. So this is a very, very new doctrine, still working out some of the kinks. Let's carry on. So here's an accurate definition of what he means. Progressive realism advocates using realist means to pursue progressive ends. Which is, again, a contradiction in terms, but okay. For the British government, that requires tough-minded honesty about the United Kingdom, the balance of power, and the state of the world. But instead of using the logic of realism solely to accumulate power, progressive realism uses it in service of just goals. For example, countering climate change, defending democracy, and advancing the world's economic development. Climate diplomacy is at the centre of progressive realism, and a Labour government would make advancing the fight against greenhouse gases central to our agenda. So it's not realism then, is it? It's complete fantasy. Can you advocate and advance for the economy of the entire world? Is that realistic? And
I
also,
support everyone being rich. This is my foreign policy.
I am a realist and a Machiavellian, don't you know? And also, it's globalist climate technocracy. That's what he's saying for. He's going to advance the fight against greenhouse gases and for climate diplomacy. So presumably...
He's going to pick a fight with the air.
Yes, as a realist. He's going to have a tough conversation with the air. Say, you need to stop being so warm. You better cool it down.
CO2, you better lose that carbon bond.
Yeah, or else...
Better become oxygen.
We might put some sanctions on you. Immediately starts choking.
Actually, it'd become water, wouldn't it?
Well, perhaps immediately starts drowning. A progressive realism worth its name begins by being honest about assumptions the West has made in the past that turned out to be wrong. And he lists the rise of China and the other members of BRICS and Russia elsewhere, the fact that we live in what they are now dubbing a multipolar world. So progressive realism, the realist aspect of it seems to be just acknowledging that reality exists, kind of, and that Britain and the US and the Anglosphere and the West as a whole are not the only players in the game anymore. So that's the only realist part that I can identify. So great start, David. The failures of Afghanistan, Iraq and Libya undermined liberal interventionism. A British government that adheres to progressive realism will not repeat these errors. Okay, so no more liberal interventionism, no more reckless gallivanting across the world and starting wars in the Middle East. Fantastic.
That's actually a good thing, yeah.
That said, that's not a good start. The last decade has made it clear that inaction has high costs too. Americans increasingly need convincing that Europeans do enough to protect their own continent's security, and as the United States becomes more focused in Asia, it will have less bandwidth for action elsewhere. The United Kingdom is ready for difficult conversations about burden sharing as long as they are part of a serious process that reinforces collective security. The European Union and the British government have no formal means of cooperation. Just get them on the phone. To address that problem, the United Kingdom must see a new geopolitical partnership with the EU, so closer bonds back with the EU again. But hang on a minute,
aren't we a member of NATO, which a decent portion of Europe is as well, which is a military alliance, presumably to coordinate a sort of military defence if Europe is attacked?
Yeah.
Is that not what that is?
So basically, yeah, he just says that complements both parties' unshakable commitment to NATO. But so it wants to both have the NATO connection and a closer tie to the EU.
But the EU isn't martial. There have been attempts.
They just want to be back.
They want a European army, don't they? Is what they want.
Essentially, it's what he's saying, yes. And above all else, the United Kingdom must continue supporting Ukraine. So I'm very glad that what he's outlining there is that for the sake of spreading global democracy, we're going to relocate the international intervention from the Middle East to European shores.
One thing I have realised about this European army thing that he's pushing for is that if you have an army that's aligned to the continent of Europe, if there is, say, an uprising in a nation or unrest, you can just send in that European army that has no allegiance to the place and fire upon them and put them down. So it's basically a permanent way of keeping a nation subservient to the EU.
Yes, and this is something that Macron has been gesturing towards for a while as well, because Macron has been saying that America, we can't always rely on them, so we need to make Europe a more secure place in terms of our collective security. And so it seems that they all want this. So progressive realism is not anything new, it's just a restatement of the regime's goals, as far as I can tell so far. Realism also means recognizing that the Indo-Pacific will be fundamental to global prosperity and security in the decades ahead, so the United Kingdom must strengthen its engagement with that region as well. So again, global prosperity, this is not a realistic term, this is a progressive and idealist term.
Didn't Keir Starmer's government, which Lamy of course is a senior part of, give away an island to Mauritius today?
I guess that was the only realistic thing to do.
Yeah, we just gave it away to a China-aligned country. Just throwing that out.
Only smart thing. In the early 21st, in the 21st century, a Labour government would see its mission as supporting state sovereignty, such as against forces such as Russian neo-imperialism, climate change, and corruption. So this is globalism again. This is the same thing we've always been dealing with. Here you go. Here's what Josh was talking about then. Starmer hands Chagos Islands back to Mauritius. Mauritius, thank you. Yeah, thanks for that. So this is progressive
and
realism
Mauritius
in action.
Only recently said they needed closer ties to China.
Oh, fantastic.
So there we go. Just giving islands to our enemies. Great.
Yeah, and then there's just more stuff talking about progressivism. Finally, progressive realism means anticipating how the dynamics between continents are about to change. By 2050, more than 1 in 4 people on the planet will live in Africa. The continent can and will generate vast growth. Not by itself.
Not if everyone's leaving.
Yeah. and the United Kingdom must once again become a leader in development, but to do so, it has to adopt a model that emphasises trading with other countries to build long-term win-win partnerships rather than allowing an outdated model of patronage. No, if you want Africa to be prosperous, you need to recolonize it. That is the sad truth of Africa. It is something that China recognises with its Belt and Road Initiative, which is a kind of half and half way of trying to inject resources and some kind of leadership into Africa.
The attempt is that they colonise it and make it a bastion of China alignment, whilst also extracting resources from there whilst they're there.
Well, exactly.
And even then, you've got people digging up their roads to sell on the...
Anybody who knows anything about Africa knows that if you want it to be prosperous, you basically need to go in and take charge. Mm-hmm. That is just how it works. So overall, the Lammy Doctrine seems... All of the unique points are retarded, and everything else is a restatement of progressivism as it exists already. I don't see the realism part of it, but that would explain why he's going out onto the UN and shouting about how black he is at Russia and Putin. Interestingly, in the follow-up to this in Foreign Affairs, they received a letter about this saying, wait a second, so what you're saying is that he's advocating the use of military power to defend or promote democracy and human rights. Isn't this just neoconservatism again? Is it not?
Neoliberalism, perhaps.
Neoliberalism, neoconservatism.
What's the difference, really?
Basically the same thing. And The Critic also did an article complaining about it where they pointed out that if you want to be realistic about things, the Lamy and Starmer and all of the Labour Party right now are far too obsessed with petty legalism and the rules-based international law to actually be able to pursue any kind of true Machiavellian realism on an international stage, which is also true. But let's be honest, if anybody is going to make Britain a leading superpower on the world stage again, it's not this guy.
No.
This man shouting about his blackness to Russia is not going to do it. And the fact that they tried to push this progressive realism, Lammy Doctrine, secret Machiavellian David Lammy at any point is pathetic and embarrassing. I do not want this man representing me or my country on the world stage. No, thank you.
Okay. Do we have some extra time for comments, Samson?
We don't have any extra time, so you've got 3 minutes to...
Should we read some... Okay. Okay. Do we have... I can't see the Rumble Rants. Oh, there's one.
That's a random name, says, grievance politics don't work on Eastern Europeans. We never enslaved anybody. Gulags, they kind of did, but still. And unlike Lammy's retard ancestors, we actually did free ourselves from our oppressors. Lammy just wants to steal our IQ. I imagine that Lammy's probably like an IQ vampire, except he doesn't actually suck the IQ from you for himself. You just reduce IQ being in the proximity with him. And Glee777 says, David contributing nicely to carbon on carbon crime.
So, I've got 2 comments I'm going to read first. Harry's threats of violence made me purchase Islander Magazine Volume 2.
I'm glad to see that they're working.
And there is a comment here that is calling me out. So George Happ says, I am confused how a libertarian can support the death penalty. The state does everything wrong, but somehow giving them power to kill people is okay. Look at the January 6th prisoners. They apparently committed treason. Should they be put to death? What law? When the law is not applied fairly, giving more power to the state is unwise. Well, actually, I agree with what you're saying there. And the position I've held for years, and I've talked about this in the office before, is that I'm against the death penalty, not because I think people don't deserve to die, but because I don't trust the state enough to do it. But I've come to realise that in British politics, actually, the death penalty is one of those things that might be quite difficult to get on the cards. So if, say, magically I became Prime Minister, and it would probably be one of the last things I do. So everything would sort of be fixed with the system before this sort of thing could come back in again. And so I feel like you could justify it. And
I certainly don't think that you could argue against the death penalty in the case of Marcellus Williams, who is such an open and shut case. So simple, easy to follow case for his guilt that it's untrue.
Yeah, and my sort of contention is that it's for murderers, rapists and paedophiles. That's what the death penalty is for. But no, I do agree. I'm very suspicious of the government. If the government introduced it now in Britain, I would immediately leave because I would be worried that it'd be used to kill me.
It would be used.
So I get what you're trying to say, but I sort of have there are a few more layers to why I'm okay with saying it, because I agree with it in principle, but you've got to have the right political context for it not to target you. So basically the short answer is I agree with it in theory, but not in practice at the minute in Britain or in the United States. But anyway, sorry, do carry on.
Oh, I think we've run out of time now.
Okay. Sorry we didn't get through more comments, but...
yeah, sorry folks, but Samson is a hard slave driver.
We've got another show after this, I think, which is why it's not Samson's fault. Let him off the hook a little bit.
Two other shows to organise after this, so I need to end in
He's got 2 other shows, so we must end. We're very sorry, but we gave you a very informative podcast, so don't be too mad.
Blame me, my first segment
We do
went on
still
for
read
ages.
the comments after we come off of the show, so we do see them.
And we do love you.
We do. And on that lovely note, with warmth in our hearts, we say goodbye. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters. And if you want to see what else we're putting out, you can follow Dan's series, Brokenomics. Here he's playing poker for some reason. If you want to follow all the other things we're putting out, you can follow us on Twitter. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.